Hi friends, my name is Katya. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit of a 2024 reading check-in. I'm going to talk to you about every book that I've read so far this year and how close that is to my goal for the overall year. What my favorite books have been so far, the tippy top, the creme de la creme, and then finally my end of year TBR, all of the books that I want to read before 2024 is over. But first, I want to talk to you guys about a small business that reached out to me that I thought that you guys might be interested in as well. Tertulia is an online indie bookstore, and they were kind enough to give me a credit so that I could check out their website and decide if I thought that it would be something that you guys would be interested in, and I do. So thank you so much, Tertulia, for allowing me to pick out a few books. I've got my box here, so I'm going to show you what I got if I can figure out how to open it. Okay, here are two books. I'm going to be talking about both of these later in this video. We have Betty and Breathers, both of which I'm excited to discuss. They also gave me a code which you guys can use to get a little bit off your order. I believe it's 15% if you use the code KOTFANS. And I will have that up on the screen and I'll link it down below as well in case you want to use it. I just really value supporting indie bookstores when I can, and when it's online it just makes it really convenient. Plus, I've really been enjoying reading the book lists and like recommendations that they have on their website, because I feel like every time I browse through there, I find things that I hadn't heard of before and that I am interested in. So again, that is Tertulia. I'll have it linked below. Okay, now we're entering the part of the video where I go through every book that I've read so far this year and tell you what I rated it. I've read 43 books so far. My goal for the year was 52, so I feel pretty confident that I'm going to reach that goal, but also I know that 43 books might be kind of tedious to listen to me talk about. So if you want to skip over this and just get to whatever the best is, I'm going to have everything timestamped, so no hard feelings if you just skip to like whatever the best books are. But the first book that I read in 2024, starting off very strong, was Chain Gang All-Stars by Nanakwame Adjei-Brenyah. This was a really fantastic sci-fi dystopian, which I gave 4 stars. Next, I read Cinder, Amy and Roger's Epic Detour, and I'll Give You the Sun, all for my rereading 2014 favorites reading vlog. Cinder, I gave 4 stars. Amy and Roger's Epic Detour, I also gave 4 stars, and then I'll Give You the Sun, I gave 5 stars. Then I read November 9 by Colleen Hoover, which is perhaps my least favorite book I've ever read in my entire life. That one I gave 1 star, which is generous. I also read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, which I rated 4 stars. I read the rest of the books in the series: A Court of Mist and Fury, A Court of Rings and Ruin, A Court of Frost and Starlight, and A Court of Silver Flames. I gave those 5 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, and 3 stars. Banyan Moon, a beautifully written family drama, which I gave 4 stars. Thornhedge, a fairy tale retelling, which I gave 4 stars. You with a View, a very disappointing romance, which I gave 2 stars. Practice Makes Perfect, I gave 4 stars. Something Close to Magic, I gave 3 stars. Our Wives Under the Sea, 3 stars. When in Rome, I gave 3 stars. Happily Never After, I gave 2 stars, which in hindsight was maybe generous. A Fire Endless, the second book in the A River Enchanted duology, I gave 4 stars. Just for the Summer, I gave 4.5 stars. The Age of Magical Overthinking, I gave 3 stars. Business or Pleasure, I also gave 3 stars. This Could Be Us was 4 stars. Funny Story by Emily Henry was a glowing 5 stars. The Garden of Time was a 4-star short story. That one I read before the Met Gala because it was the theme of this year's Met Gala. My Sister's Keeper was a reread, which I gave 4 stars. I read 3 Bridgerton books: The Duke and I, The Viscount Who Loved Me, and Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. I gave The Duke and I 2 stars, The Viscount Who Loved Me 3 stars, and Romancing Mr. Bridgerton also 3 stars. I Who Have Never Known Men was a very dark, harrowing story, which I gave 4 stars. Ready or Not by Cara Bastone, I gave 3 stars. Listen for the Lie, I also gave 3 stars. Patricia Wants to Cuddle was another 3 stars. Powerless, another 3 stars. House of Earth and Blood, I gave 4 stars. Vampires of El Norte, The Last Thing He Told Me, and Bride, I gave all 4 stars. Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn got 3 stars. Attached at the Hip got 2 stars. Betty by Tiffany McDaniel was 5 stars. This Lullaby by Sarah Dessen was 3 stars. And finally, the most recent book that I read this year was Shark Heart, which I gave 4 stars. Alright, so going through that list, I don't have like a ton of 5 stars, but I do have lots of 3 stars and lots of 4 stars, which I feel pretty good about in terms of my reading year so far. But let's talk about my favorites. First, we have Betty. This book I finished reading relatively recently. I actually started reading it because I borrowed it from the library. I got about halfway through, and halfway through I knew that I loved it so much that I needed to own it physically so that I could add it to my personal collection. Betty is a deeply sad, beautiful story about a girl named Betty growing up in the early 1950s in Ohio. She is the 6th of 8 siblings, and she's half white, half Cherokee. This book is less about plot and more just about different vignettes that are happening within Betty's life. The characters in this are so vibrant, especially her siblings and her father, and it's written so beautifully. Tiffany McDaniel is such a talented writer. When I first started reading this book, I was reading the prologue, and the first 3 chapters made me tear up because the writing was so just gorgeous. This is a very depressing book. I remember when I was reading it, like as I was inside the book, it felt like I will never be happy again. Life is pain, life is suffering. This is my like very real warning to you. If you are triggered by anything, it's probably in this book. Like any trigger warning you could possibly conceive of, it is probably present here. There's just a lot of really unfortunate things that happen to this family. The characters have this determination to like keep moving forward, and even if everything isn't going to be perfect, Betty will survive it. And it was just a really moving, visceral reading experience, which I highly recommend if that sounds like something that you might enjoy. On a bit of a lighter note, I also have a funny story by Emily Henry. This I think is probably my second favorite Emily Henry after People We Meet on Vacation, which is the kind of book that just made me feel so seen that no other Emily Henry book has been able to surpass it in my ranking so far, but this is a very close second. This you've probably heard about. We follow our main 2 characters, Daphne and Miles, who end up fake dating because their ex-fiance and ex-girlfriend are dating one another. There's lots of drama, lots of hijinks. They're roommates and besties, and they fall in love with one another. My favorite thing about Miles as a love interest is how much he really like listens and does small things to show how much he cares about Daphne, even when they're just friends before anything becomes romantic. There are just little moments where he notices, for example, that Daphne is always carrying a coffee cup with her. So the next time they see one another, he brings her coffee because he thinks that she'll like that. And then when he finds out that she only drinks chai, he consistently starts bringing her chai instead. It's just those like very little things that show that he's paying attention and he's doing things for her, and he's noticing and trying to care for her even in tiny, seemingly insignificant ways. I think it builds like a very sweet foundation for their relationship as it progresses. Daphne is also kind of trying to discover and cement who she is and what she likes, because in the past she's really sort of centered her personality on whatever relationship that she was in and kind of centered her life around her romantic partner. So seeing her start to feel more confident in her independence while also falling in love, I think was a really delicate balance to make, and Emily Henry does it very well in this book, in my opinion. There are so many things that I could say about this book, and I know that I've talked about it in the past, so I'm trying to pull small details that I haven't mentioned before, but those are just some of the reasons that I enjoyed this book so much. Chain Gang All-Stars is a sci-fi dystopian where in America, if you're a prisoner on death row, instead of being on death row, you can choose to participate in this program where different prisoners across the United States battle to the death in reality TV show televised death matches, and if you survive to the end, you earn your freedom. I thought that the really big strength of this book was its world building. I think that any dystopian that can make you feel like the world is plausible is the most scary kind of dystopian, and this falls into that category very easily. This book employs footnotes, which sometimes I can find annoying in other books, but in this one I thought that it was so well done and added so much to the story. There were moments where they would like reference the laws that they were talking about, which was helpful for understanding the world. But then every once in a while, the footnotes would also reference court cases that have happened like in reality, and there were moments where I had to Google like, is this a real court case, and consistently they were real court cases that the author was using to kind of help build the world. And I just thought that it was so effective at making everything feel even more real. And it was also really fascinating to me as a law student. I'm going into my second year of law school in the fall, and so when that kind of thing is incorporated into a book, I find it really fascinating. Another interesting way that the footnotes were used is that every single time a character died, and this is a pretty like violent book, there are lots of gory character deaths, but every single time a character died, there would be a little footnote about that person and what their life was like before they died. And I thought that that was so thoughtful and valuable, reminding the reader that all of these characters are people. They're not just like extras who are dying. And I think that that helped the violence to not feel gratuitous, even though it's an incredibly gory book. But yes, Chain Gang All-Stars, thoughtfully written, thought-provoking to read. Switching gears entirely, I loved Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This is a marriage of convenience paranormal romance where a vampire marries a werewolf. I was very hesitant going into this because I have never read anything like even slightly Omegaverse related. I'm not really a fan fiction kind of person, and I was just concerned that it would be too much for me. So if you're in that boat as well, I'm telling you, you'll probably be fine. This was mostly just a contemporary rom-com. It was pretty light on the paranormal elements, but the paranormal elements that were present I really enjoyed. The political relations between the vampires and the humans and the werewolves I thought were really interesting. The character dynamics were so fun, not only between Misery and Lo, the vampire and the werewolf, but between all of the characters. There were several reveals at the end of the book. I only predicted one, but the rest like made my jaw drop. And the romance was slow burn, very adorable. I was absolutely rooting for Misery and Lo to be together. Perhaps one of my favorite Ali Hazelwood couples that I've read about so far. It felt to me kind of like a return to the books that I really loved in late elementary and middle school. And that's not, I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. I could see how that could be interpreted as being a bad thing, but like I loved Twilight. I loved Vampire Academy, House of Night, Shiver, Paranormal Sea, Beautiful Creatures. Like those were the books that were my life in 5th, 6th, 7th grade, and it has been so long since I've read any sort of paranormal romance, and I think this one was light enough on the paranormal stuff that it was really enjoyable to like dip my toes back into. I did give this 4 stars, but in hindsight I feel like the only reason that I gave it 4 stars was because I was a little embarrassed at how much I loved a vampire werewolf romance, so this one might be a 5-star read for me. I really loved it. Okay, now it's time for the end of year TBR. I'm going to start off with my current read, which is a novel love story by Ashley Poston. This book follows our main character Eileen, who ends up stranded in a small town, and she finds out that this small town is actually the small town setting of her favorite romance novels. Think like Stars Hollow, Virgin River. This is a fictional place filled with fictional characters suddenly come to life, and our main character Eileen doesn't really understand like why she's there or what's going on, but perhaps she will fall in love along the way. Ashley Poston writes rom-coms with slightly supernatural or magical elements, and I've enjoyed her books in the past, and I'm excited to keep reading this and see what I think of it. Now to mention that other book that was in my haul from earlier, I have Breathers by S.G. Brown. This is a zombie rom-com, which I had never heard of before until somebody told me that it was their favorite romance, and I was intrigued enough to pick it up. This again follows 2 zombies who fall for each other, and I feel like it might be something good to pick up in October. I also want to read The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. This is a fantasy set during the Spanish Inquisition. I want to read Past, Present, Future by Rachel Lynn Solomon, which is the sequel to Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, which is one of my absolute favorite young adult rom-coms I've ever read. I'm always like a little bit nervous when a book that I really love gets a sequel because I don't want it to be ruined, but I'm hopeful that this will be a good sequel. It's about the 2 characters in the first book navigating a long-distance relationship, and I'm just excited to spend more time with Rowan and Neil, the characters in this book. Speaking of YA rom-com sequels, I really want to read Nothing Like the Movies, which is the sequel to Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. Lynn Painter is an author who I have not had a lot of luck with since I read Better Than the Movies, which I think is a perfect 5-star YA rom-com. However, every other book that I've read by her has just been kind of like middling to bad, and Nothing Like the Movies is one that I hope lives up to Better Than the Movies. I really love Wes and Liz, the main characters in that first book, and so again, I guess I'm excited to spend more time with them, but I am hesitantly optimistic for this one. Next, we can talk about some fantasy series. I would like to read House of Sky and Breath and House of Flame and Shadow, which are the next 2 books in the Crescent City series, just so I can finish that off and read all of the books that are out. I don't know if this is a completed trilogy or if there are more books that are coming out, so let me know if you know a little bit more than I do. I want to read Reckless, the sequel to Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I didn't necessarily love Powerless, but it ended on such a cliffhanger that I do feel like I need to read Reckless so that I can know what happens. I said at the beginning of the year that I want to finish the Jade City trilogy. I don't have a ton of confidence in myself that I'll get to both books, but I would like to at least start Jade Ward, the second book in the series. This is an urban fantasy series following rival crime families who use jade to give them magical abilities. It's really action-packed and I really enjoyed the first book, so I need to continue this series. Circe is a book that I've owned for so long. I think this has been sitting on my shelf for like 2 years and I have not cracked it open once. I don't know why I can't find the motivation to read this book. I think I'm a little bit intimidated by it, but I'm hoping to finally read it this year. I think it might be a good one to give a chance in the fall. It just feels like an autumnal read to me. Maybe it's the orangey cover. Tom Lake is another book that I've been saying over and over that I want to read and I've been putting off for whatever reason. We follow a family during 2020 and the mom is telling her daughters stories about her past and like past relationships, and it seems like it's going to be heartwarming, family focused, but also a little bit dramatic, and I love that. I would really like to read Intermezzo by Sally Rooney, which is about 2 brothers who are navigating the death of their father, and also one of them plays chess, I guess. I don't know. And finally, for a bit of fun, fluffy, Gossip Girl levels of rich people drama, I would love to read Magnolia Parks. All right, those are going to be all of the books that I'm going to talk about in today's video. Thank you so much for watching and for spending time with me. I really appreciate you. Let me know down below what your favorite book has been that you've read in 2024 so far, or something that you're looking forward to reading in the next few months of the year. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click the bell to be notified of the next time I post, and I'll see you in my next video.